Let me start off by saying that my wife doesn't believe in paranormal entities or anything of that nature. We have 3 cats, and one of them likes to be a rebel, jumping onto counters and meowing at the top of his lungs, just looking for attention. He does this throughout the night, and it's a regular occurrence. Last night, after a few beers and video games, I decided it was time to head to bed with my wife. When I woke up this morning, my wife was basically attached to me with wide eyes and a nervous look on her face. I asked her what was wrong, and she proceeded to tell me what happened last night. She said that around 2:50 in the morning, she was woken up to a noise that sounded like one of our cats downstairs meowing unusually loud. After giving herself a few seconds to perk up and fully pay attention, she said that the meows sounded more like a person trying to mimic a cat, and it kept saying, "Hello." After meowing for 2 to 3 minutes, a loud bang came at our door, and then a notification went off for a motion sensor at our front door. When she told me this, I checked my phone, and sure enough, there was a notification for motion detected at 2:52 a.m. I asked her why she didn't wake me up so I could grab my gun. She said she was frozen with fear and didn't want it to hear her make a noise. We're out running errands while I'm typing this, but something made me uncomfortable about her story. Last night, I set the home security alarm around 9 p.m., and we didn't turn it off till we walked the dog this morning. To make things worse, we had slept with all of the animals in the room and the door was closed. So, whatever was in our house or outside the front door was not one of our animals. Obviously, the first thing that came to mind was a skinwalker. But maybe I'm just being paranoid. I checked all the rooms in the house after I got up. I'm not sure what I could have done anyways. It's very odd that my wife was scared so badly by something she doesn't necessarily believe in. We bought this house brand new, so no one has lived here before. When I'm home alone, I do feel like I'm being watched, or someone's always walking directly behind me. My wife also said that the house has given her chills since we moved in. Something is just off about it. We just got home, and I went to hang up one of my shirts in the master bedroom closet, when I noticed that the board that covers the attic access had been shifted a little. When I asked my wife about it, she said she's never been up there, and the builders would have placed it back in its original place before we made the purchase. I'm genuinely getting anxious just thinking about what could be going on. Has anyone had an experience like this? Or similar at least? We're going to my mother-in-law's to get some sage. My wife said burning it should keep whatever's around our house away. It was a few years back during a road trip with my buddy Jake. We were cruising through the desert, chasing that feeling of freedom that you only get on the open road. But little did we know we were about to encounter something that would shatter that sense of freedom and leave us fighting for our lives. We were driving through Navajo territory, miles away from civilization, when we saw it. A figure standing by the side of the road, illuminated by the headlights of our car. At first we thought it was just a trick of the light, but as we got closer, we realized it was something else entirely. He looked like a man, but there was something off about him. His eyes glowed in the darkness, and his limbs seemed too long, too twisted. And then, just as quickly as we saw him, he vanished. into the desert night. We tried to shake it off, telling ourselves it was just our imaginations running wild. But as we continued down the road, things took a turn for the worst. We started hearing strange noises outside the car, scratching at the windows, whispers on the windshield. Jake laughed it off, but I could tell he was nervous. I was too. And then, without warning, something slammed in the side of the car, sending us careening off the road and into the desert. The car flipped over, and everything went dark. When I came to, Jake was nowhere to be found. I stumbled out of the wreckage, calling out for him, but all I heard was the sound of my own voice echoing through the desert. I searched for hours, but there was no sign of him. That's when I saw it. The figure from before, standing on a nearby ridge, watching me with those glowing eyes. I knew then what we were dealing with. A skinwalker, a creature of Navajo legend, able to take on the form of any animal or human that it chooses. I didn't waste my time. I ran as fast as I could, the sound of my heart pounding in my ears, but no matter how far I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, hunting me, waiting for the right moment to strike. It took me days to make it back to civilization, days filled with fear and paranoia. And when I finally reached help, I told them everything. About the skinwalker, about Jake, about the nightmare that had become my reality. But no one believed me. They said it was just a trick of the desert, a figment of my imagination, but I know the truth. I know what I saw that night, so I'll never forget it. The desert may be vast and empty, but it's also home to things that lurk in the shadows, things that are better left undisturbed. And if you ever find yourself driving through the desert at night, remember one thing. Beware the skinwalker, for it is always watching, always waiting, and it will stop at nothing to claim its prey. My grandfather told me a story once as we sat around a campfire in his backyard in the cool night of the Arizona desert. The horizon was clear, and each star twinkled in a purple sky, with a full, fat moon hanging low over the mountains. His voice was raspy and gravelly, the result of a lifetime of smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. The fire danced and shined across his wide, dark eyes as he settled into a sleep, ready to tell his story. Way back, when I was a boy, about your age, he began, I lived outside an Apache reservation with your great-grandfather. He had returned from the war and set about raising horses and cattle on a 100-acre ranch settled between a brambly mountainside with dirt good for growing thorn bush and not much else. One night, my mother was sick, and Pa and I took a trip into town, about 50 miles away, straight through a dry desert, over a washed-out creek, and some old abandoned farmsteads. The fire sparked, a log cracked, jolting me out of the story. What next? I asked. Settle down, boy. You'll hear soon enough. Paul and I were driving in an old Ford pickup truck. I remember it was dark out, inky and thick, with only the lights of our old truck lighting up the road. I remember, too, when the engine began to sputter and the truck slowed to a jerky stop. Damn it, Pa said. guiding the Ford to the side of the road as it coasted to a halt. "Stay here, son," as he stepped out into the darkness, shutting the door with a heavy thud. My window was down and the cool desert air was breezy and felt good on my hot face and neck. Paul was getting water from the back to cool the engine, and that's when I smelled rotting eggs. Strange, I thought, to smell sulfur in the desert. My nose also picked up carrion, like one of them dead, bloated cattle that would drop from the heat and lay there until the crows pecked enough holes in their hide to cause the whole thing to explode. It stunk, and I gagged. My skin started to tingle too. The back of my neck felt itchy, and my face started to get hot. The wind stopped blowing and hung still and heavy, with a stink filling the cab. "Paw," I called. "Paw?" No answer. My heart started beating, and I felt such a fear in me, in my bones, in my chest. Boy, I tell you, I never felt fear like this. Not until Vietnam. Not until I saw men dying around me. I locked the door and reached over for my paw's door and saw a shadow bound across the road through both dim beams of light, across the partly open domed hood. Grandfather paused. He spit a fat wad of tobacco off to the side, and he looked pensively into the darkness. I realized I was holding my breath and gasped for air. The night was cool, but I was sweaty and clammy. "Well, what happened? What about your father? What did you see?" He sighed. "A creature." He shook his head. "You have to understand. There were legends. Old legends, older than the rock cairns out in the valley. Older still than Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. Than the old Indian chiefs and their shamans. The Apache and Hope and Cherokee. And all of them old tribes and first peoples. They told tales, old stories about dark Indian magic. A deal made with old spirits of blood sacrificed to gain power. Old power. Enough to fight each other and the Spaniards and later the white men that came for their land and women. They called them..." He paused. Grandfather took a deep breath and bodied forward into his tale. Across the fire and the sky, the desert, the creek, the moon, the sun, and old mountains, he went forward. They called them skinwalkers, shape-changers, old warriors resurrected as skinless men, all sinew and muscle, walking on deer legs with the torso of a man and the head of a coyote. But messed up, boy, long and malformed snouts, teeth like a bowie knife, long arms and standing 7 foot, even hunched over. They'd gut the old cowboys and white riders. They'd run through bullets and sabers, part the Spanish armor like it was a potato sack. Wily, too. They could change their voice to match a person you knew or might know. Boy, that's what I saw. Big and fast. Only for a second, it ran across the road. Gray and mottled. Muscle flexing under its legs. Hooves clomping on the road. Stringy, muscled, hunched shoulders. And it turned. Looked right into the cab. Looked right into my eyes. And I swear, boy, I swear, it grinned at me. I sank into my seat. In shock, in fear, shaking, I knew death was near. The air was electric. I smelled ozone and brimstone. The air felt right before the lightning comes and blows a tree to smithereens, charged and full with power. I yelled for my paw, but No words came out, just a dry squeak. I was shaking as grandfather told a story. He was still here, so I know he lived, but the supernatural always fascinated me, and even now, I felt the force of his words. The real power of skinwalkers was trickery. Sure, they could change their voices, but also their skin. So, they could take others. Not for long, the legends say, maybe an hour before the soul of the skin they wore would come looking for their mortal shell before going to whatever hell awaited them. Though I think that getting skinned alive was hell enough. A minute passed in what felt like a lifetime, 1 second in 1,000 years. My father's door opened, and I jerked my head to the left, putting my fists up to fend off attack. "Son, it's me," my father said before climbing into the cab. He grasped the steering wheel and pulled himself in awkwardly, jerking himself into the seat. I cringed into the corner. I looked at him. I looked hard. Boy, your great-grandfather was a good man. Treated me and my ma right. He fought in Vietnam and he saw the worst of man in Poland when he freed all them camps. And now I was taking his measure. Is this my father? Do I make a run or do I die? Is it him or not? Let's go get that medicine for your ma. As he pulled the truck into gear and pulled it out on the road, and our trip resumed. Guess it was him after all. But how did you know? Was it because he said something about your mom? I asked my grandfather. No, boy. I knew because out the window, out the corner of my eye, I seen that beast running 50 miles an hour right next to the car, looking at me with them yellow eyes and grinning mouth. I looked and saw it, hunched and angry, running next to us. My pa kept his eyes on the road, locked, straightforward. "Son," he said, "don't look at it. Don't look at it." That's how I knew, boy. If you're reading this, congratulations. I am probably dead, or worse. My name is Daniel. I own quite a bit of land up in the Appalachian Mountains, left to me by my great aunt. So far, in the years I've lived here, paranormal and downright disturbing things have happened to me here. People told me to leave or report it, like I've never done that before. To them, I'm just the young guy that went crazy a little too early. It bothers me that normal people have no idea what goes on up here, all alone. My first encounter with them, I didn't know how to deal with them. Heck, I didn't even know what they were called until recently. It's important, or at least it's important to me, that some of the tricks I've learned throughout the 3 years I've lived here could be of use to somebody. My second, or maybe third time I was stalked by a skinwalker, I felt like I was walking in circles. I had a trail camera with an SD card pretty deep in the woods. But when I tried to walk back to my cabin, I kept passing the camera. I was effectively walking in circles. This went on for hours. The sun was setting soon, and I was quite thirsty at the time, I remember. I sat up against a tree my camera was mounted on and started softly crying. It was watching me, I guess waiting for me to fall dead. I hit myself in desperation a few times trying to think. I sat up and took a very deep breath, wiped the water from my eyes, and it dawned on me. It's gotta be messing with my equilibrium. I have to be off balance. There's no other way. Teleportation in hindsight sounded stupid. But I could still walk, but my depth perception was slightly off. All I had to do was tilt my head as far as it would go into my shoulder and walk back to my cabin. My ear was pressed to my shoulder, but even with one ear, I could still hear how anxious the creature sounded, pacing in the woods, hoping I didn't get away. Once I made it inside my cabin, I didn't come out for a couple days for safe measure. Another trick they know is mimicking animals. I found that they like coyotes. I used to coyote hunt quite a bit back home, but never up here in the mountains. I've seen a couple of my deer cameras that look like right after I left the camera, the coyote would follow me a while, if not all the way home. I had to stop that real quick and set out some snares. All a snare would and could do was jam the coyote's leg in the mechanism until a button is pressed and the thing would unlock. I set out a couple of them, but also rubbed white ash on all the traps, and sure enough, the next time I start walking back from my camera, I hear the sound of one go off. I quickly ran back to where I had laid the traps, gun drawn, and all that was left was the trap in 3 separate bent-up pieces and the subtle scent of burning hair in the air. Every time I checked the cameras after that, a coyote with a nasty burn scar on its leg would stop where the camera was mounted and turn around and walk back into the brush. And lastly, do not engage in any type of combat with them. Warding them off is one thing, but actively hunting them is a mistake. I wish I would have known that sooner. I had 2 buddies back in town I used to tell my stories to. Alcohol loosens the lips. Their names were James and Cole. I'm pretty sure they were cousins, but I never asked. Thinking about it now, I wish I would have gotten to know them better. Long story short, they're dead and I'm dying. The morning they came and pounded on my door insisting we hunt these skinwalkers. I told them it was a very bad idea, but they even took the liberty of buying silver bullets. They told me how much they cost, but I can't remember right now. I finally caved and we prepared all day. We first started making a large amount of white ash, cleaning our guns. Heck, they even packed MREs and special high-dollar spotlights. We set off right as the sun went down. We weren't 3 hours in when disaster struck. We were all sitting around a tree. I could tell these skinwalkers were watching us. They're all around us, multiple. I'm frantically scanning everything with my spotlight, not even realizing Cole wasn't with us anymore. I asked James where he was, but he didn't seem nervous at all and told me he may have had to pee. I turned back to face my front, and there I see Cole. He's a good distance out, but something wasn't right. He was contorting in ways a human could never. I started to turn around to ask James what we should do, but halfway around I hear James's guttural sounding breathing, like his lungs were filling with blood. I couldn't stand to be there anymore and booked it back to the cabin. The forest seemed like it was laughing at me. In my desperation to run home, I knocked my flashlight running and it was slowly getting dimmer and dimmer. I eventually had to ditch it and use some of the flares Cole and James brought. I pulled the top off and struck it against a tree, and the red flame lit up the surrounding forest. There were so many of them. 10, 20, probably more. But as luck would have it, they never attacked me. I could see the cabin and flung the door open and shut it behind me. I ran for the upstairs bedroom and quickly got into the old wooden closet where I am typing this. I don't hear them, but they're outside my house. Unfortunately, I did end up getting clawed, or maybe bitten. It's not a terrible wound, but it's bleeding black. If you can, send help. Please do. I really need it this time.